Tanya in Texas, pronouns are she, her. Do you hold supernatural beliefs other than a God belief? And mine's really simple. As someone who came out of spiritualism, whatever that even really means, no. I realized any supernatural belief I had made no sense, and I was not justified in having it, and I've abandoned those beliefs. So my answer is pretty simple.
Yeah. And currently, I mean, while I'm happy to discuss it, I'd love to know what supernatural beliefs someone thinks we should believe in and why. But to date, I have no good reason to believe in anything supernatural.
Sure. So that's why I wanted to talk about it a little bit, because I'm an atheist now, but I was most recently a Methodist. And even in the atheist community, among the people that I've met, I hear a lot of people talking about other supernatural things like the spirit world and ghosts and karma and ESP and having psychic abilities and, past lives, or just, things like intuition, or, having hunches, or thinking that they know things that are going to happen in the future, or even things like, crystals and rocks and energy healing. And I was just kind of wondering, if you believed in anything like that.
Yes.
And then if you did, how would you rationalize it? And then if you don't, why do we hold on to so many of these things, I guess? Because even I have a hard time sometimes, telling myself that, no, these things aren't real, because, sometimes I want to think that I know things. And I try to talk myself out of that, but it's just hard to let go of some of those things.
Well, you lumped a bunch of things in there that I don't think are all problematic, and certainly not all supernatural. Intuition is not supernatural. Someone might be convinced wrongly that it's supernatural, but we live our lives by inference and induction. This notion that, hey, tomorrow is pretty much like today, and if we, get a good understanding of how things work today, we might have a better understanding of how things are going to work tomorrow. That's how you train your gut, how you train your intuition. So there's nothing about it that's supernatural that I can see. I understand why people might feel that it's supernatural or think that it's supernatural. But that's more about, let's point out the mistakes in people's thinking, and not pretend that something isn't real.
I guess I could go either way on that. I think, we have sort of an evolutionary learning that takes place that sort of, teaches us to recognize things in our environment. But I think, I hear a lot of people going a little bit further than that and kind of saying, oh, well, don't go play golf today because I have a feeling something, bad is going to happen to you if you go, or, kind of, just taking it maybe a little bit further than, what we could really, rationalize as learning from our environment. And I guess maybe I'd want to know, like, how far would you take something like maybe intuition, or just ESP? At what point would you categorize it as supernatural?
Well, ESP has never been demonstrated to, like, haven't even demonstrated that a phenomenon actually exists. And so the first thing that you have to do is say, okay, here's a phenomenon, and it actually happens, and some people think it's supernatural. I don't know how you would go about proving that something is in fact supernatural, but the first step must be to demonstrate that there's a there. And yeah. ESP hasn't done that, despite countless attempts to test for that.
Yeah, it's kind of like talking about Reiki, right? It's like, well, we know there's hands waving over people. We don't know there's an actual thing there that's even going on, right? So I'm not really sure.
I mean, ESP is a testable thing. I mean, I'm a magician, and so I have a bunch of Zener decks laying around with the circle and the plus and the triangle and the square and the wavy lines and the star, or not the triangle, the circle plus wavy lines, square and star. But you can do a test like that. And yes, they joke about it in the first Ghostbusters movie, but there's never been a demonstration that a proper test demonstration that there's any sort of remote viewing or ability to communicate mind to mind in any sense like that. And so that would have to happen first before we could then say, okay, is this a natural phenomenon or is it cause supernatural? I don't know how to ever demonstrate a supernatural cause, but before we can worry about whether or not it's supernatural or natural, we should demonstrate that there's an effect.
That makes sense. So in terms of things like psychic abilities, have you ever maybe experienced something that you can't explain, or maybe known something that you can't explain how you know it, or there's no rational reason why you would know it? You know, for example, I mean, there's obviously a lot of psychics out there, and there's different techniques like hot reading, cold reading.
I'm aware of no psychics out. I'm aware of no psychics out there.
Yeah.
People engaged in hot reading and cold reading aren't psychics; they're frauds or magicians.
Yeah, you don't get to call them a psychic just in virtue of what they call themselves. So that has to be demonstrated that that's an actual thing. So giving them the actual title is just giving them credit they don't deserve.
Yeah. But I've experienced plenty of things that I don't have an explanation for. And then my position is I can't explain that. But when it comes to, like, when you say knowing things that I don't have a good reason to know, I would argue that I don't know those things, that what's actually happening is I'll have a suspicion or an intuition or an instinct or a gut feeling, and it will turn out to be correct. And the best explanation for why it's correct is that either I understood things about the world and made a correct inference, or I got lucky. Neither of which requires any sort of special, thought at all. For example, in the old days, but well, maybe it still happens with cell phones, but I can remember picking up the phone to call my mom one day, and it never rang, but I dialed the number. And I just sat there and there was no ringtone or nothing. I was like, wow, that's weird. And my mom was already on the other line. We had picked up the phone and we had dialed each other, intending to call each other at the same time. And one of us connected first. And so it never rang. We don't even know which one of us connected first. And so then the question is like, ooh, that's so eerie. Why on earth would you and your mom think to pick up the phone and call each other at exactly the same time? There must be something supernatural going on. And in truth, no. You have a sort of internal clock where if you go too long without talking to certain people, the odds that they're going to be calling you increases, and the odds that you're going to be calling them soon increases.
Yeah.
And if it's somebody like a parent where, you're that's just likely to happen. But even if it's something extraordinary, like Jmike and I don't call each other on a regular basis, but even if it happened there, it would not be anything more than an extraordinary circumstance. There's no conclusion we could reach that the universe desperately needed Mike and I to talk.
I guess the other question would be, do you hear, in the communities that you're a part of with other atheists or non-believers, do you hear people talking about, being psychic or knowing somebody that's psychic, or, having sort of, extra abilities, and how do you hear them rationalizing it?
Yeah, I hear it all the time. It's first off, that's just a claim that somebody makes, and anybody can make claims. The way they rationalize it is because they have really bad standards of evidence, so they're convinced easily. They don't employ a good standard of knowing things. They don't take things like epistemology seriously. They don't take things like critical thinking seriously. They're convinced under a basis. From my perspective, that would be very sloppy. And then when it comes to certain things that they also have issues with, like if I had pointed some scientific study to show why manifestation has the same exact success rate as chance, for example, right? That all of a sudden now they want the most rigorous standards to set up that's the case. But for their position initially, they don't have these giant walls of justification that they need, right? And so it just comes down to they're going to rationalize it on the basis of the fact that they already have low standards of evidence. So there's not much they have to do in order for it to make sense in their mind. At least that's my perspective of it.
So when you hear these things, do you try to talk your friends out of it, or do you just kind of let them, believe what they want to believe, even though it doesn't really make sense?
No, so I asked them what,
Mhm.
what's independent about it. My go-to is usually pretty simple, right? I'll tell somebody, hey, let me hand you a biology book, and it says evolution's true, or it says some phenomena is true, right? And I just go, I expect you to believe it, and they're gonna be like, well, yeah, but how do you actually know it's true? And that's gonna be my point. My point is that there's nothing about the fact that you can claim to me, or that I can read about psychics, or that someone could go to a blog and type that they had this crazy scenario and they can relay all this information to us, right? It's going to come down to what independent, right? My question to them is always, I'm not going to say just believe evolution because the book says so. I'm going to say, hey, there's things like allele frequency changes in population. We could measure these types of things. Maybe point them to like the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, or equations at which you can see evolution occurring in populations and at what rates, right? And we can do that independent of the claim itself. There's some independent attestation or justification. So I'm never like, I'm going to talk you out. I just want to ask that simple question or give the example. And I always go, what is that independent thing? Like you would know. And usually they just always go back to, well, I saw it happen, right? There's nothing other than just the claim that they believe is already true. And if that sits with them, I think it'll do a lot of the work it should. If not, we just have to have a continuous series of conversations. But if it's harmful to the person, then my concerns raise higher. And in the spiritual world, that is a really big risk and thing that people are using in marketing for monetary gain, and disregarding medical, the right medical procedures in certain situations.
No, that makes sense. I just feel that I have kind of a hard time, talking people out of these things, where, they don't necessarily believe in God, but then, they believe that they can predict the future, or, they believe that they just know things, and, or they're just spiritual, and, or they believe that, dead people talk to them and give them signs.
Well, Tania, do you believe in any of those things?
I used to, but, sort of as I progressed towards becoming an atheist, it just sort of occurred to me that, these other beliefs don't make sense. So
and why was that? For the same, was it for this? Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I guess it was, if I'm going to say that I don't believe in, God as a supernatural being, then, I can't really say that I'm going to, hold other supernatural beliefs. If I either will believe in the supernatural or I won't.
Yeah, it's either the case that the supernatural has been demonstrated or it hasn't. And then this goes back to Matt's point of how do we even do that? And so if anybody's on that side kind of making that claim that they have access to the supernatural, well, presumably they have access to some methodology to determine it because they determined it. And so they had to utilize some methodology. If they can provide that, that's fine. Nobody's ever in my, length of asking has been able to successfully do that. So it always just comes down to the same question. I mean, how could you even determine that in the first place?
Yeah. So, but it doesn't, stop other people from sort of harassing you with those beliefs either. For example, back when I was, a religious person and had supernatural beliefs, there were people around me that, that are still around me today that sort of felt that I was psychic because, things would happen or I would just know, like they'd be looking for something and I'd like randomly know where it is, or, somebody would die and I would have a dream that, about them, and it would have been like when they died, just weird things that would happen that, at that time.
Wouldn't it be weirder, Tania, like my question when people say things, I've had people say similar things to me, people in like the spiritual community I was friends with. Wouldn't it be weird if we, like, it kind of goes like a miracle thing where like, wouldn't it be weird if these things didn't happen, right? Like, don't we live in a world where you're going to have statistical anomalies rear their head at times that aren't as proliferant as other situations that are higher occurrences, right? It's like, seems like the criterion that someone in those shoes want is that you would never have coincidences or never have these types of statistical anomalies. And to me, that seems more supernatural, because the natural world embodies these types of things.
Yeah,
Right.
it's.
So now I'm in a situation where, there are still people out there that, still believe that I'm psychic. So like family members that I can't convince that will call me and be like, should I do this? Should I do that? I'm like, hey, I'm not psychic. Like, I don't believe in any of that. And I can't really convince them. So, people just want to ask me things all the time because they think that I know. And even though I tell them that I don't believe that anymore, and I think, I was just lucky, or I can't really explain how I knew those things, but, I don't think I have any special powers. I can't really stop them from, investing in this and also, sort of perpetuating it also behind my back to
What
like
are they
other
asking
people
you
that
for?
also believe in it that are just convinced, Well, they want me to like talk to, relatives that have passed on, or, get messages, give messages.
Why?
They want me to, tell them where things are that they can't find, or like read their past lives, or, tell them like whether or not they should take this job or that job, or something basic like, should they play golf tomorrow? Things like that. And, and I used to have a lot of luck.
You have family members who are calling you because they think you're psychic and they want you to tell them if they should play golf tomorrow.
Well, I mean, that's kind of a bad example. That only happened once.
It happened.
The fact that it happened at all, like if family members called me and said, I think you're psychic, I would say, I think you're stupid.
Well, I mean, I can't really say that because, I thought I was psychic a lot of years ago too. But, now I just think I was lucky and I don't believe in any of that. So it's kind of hard to.
The point is, if they accuse me of being psychic, I'm going to accuse them of being stupid. And then now we're going to have a discussion about which one of those two is more probable. Like, first of all, I don't have, I'm probably the wrong person to ask because I don't have that many friends around me who believe in any of this bullshit, and nobody in my family. And I've been on stage. I can blow people's minds on stage and pretend to do things that are impossible mind reading wise. So that's a slight advantage I have, having been a magician my whole life. But to have people think that you're really psychic. I mean, first of all, I'm incredibly sad for them that they have been bound into making decisions about what to do with their life based on the suspicion that somebody else is psychic who can talk to somebody else who's dead, and that person who's dead would actually know what the fuck they should do with their life. This is a cascade of ridiculousness. Why would my great grandmother, who knew nothing about computers now, when she was alive, why would I pay any psychic to talk to her to find out, something about a computer, or where to golf, or, where did you hide the will? Well, okay, that would be a good question to ask, except that if we could run around to a psychic and say, please talk to dead relatives and find out where they hid the will, and then you keep finding wills, that would be evidence for a phenomenon. But we don't have anything remotely like that. Instead, it's tell them I'm fine. Let me hear that they're fine in the afterlife and all this other stuff. Wow. Yeah. I can't, I'm sorry, Tanya. I can't imagine people calling me to say, I really need help with whether or not I should get this job. What do the dead people who I think you talk to have to say about it?
Well, and now it's kind of like, I've said enough times that I don't believe in this stuff that, they just call me now like for advice, right? But then if I give the advice, if it works out for them, then, it's like this confirmation bias.
Tanya, hold on. Hold on. I got to stop you, Tanya. When you give them the advice, you're reinforcing that to them. You're reinforcing them to call you back and seek more advice. The only way that you stop that and have them ponder for a second of whether or not it's the case, you tell them, look, I'm not giving you any fucking advice because I'm not fucking psychic, right? That's how you squash that. Like, Massive, if my mom or my dad called me and was like, had anything to do with something like that, like I would be as explicit as possible that I'm not, and go out of my way to demonstrate to them all the things I don't know. I'd go out of my way to make myself look as dumb as possible, right? To show that there's a giant statistical amount of things there's just a giant, amount of things I don't know. And I don't know how, if I'm psychic, that I would be able to cash that out as a psychic, right? I would do anything in my power. So when you go and you start saying, well, I give them the advice, I'm hoping you're not doing that continuously. I'm hoping you're putting your foot down. I mean, it's your life and
No,
choice. I don't want to
it's
give you
more
advice by any
like
means, but
that's more like conversations or just, talking about like what's going on in your life. Oh, I had this job interview. Oh, like, do you think my resume looks good? And you just sort of talk and, things come up. And,
Yeah, I've had those.
I don't like couch it as, like I'm telling you what to do. But, I think like sometimes it comes back to me where like they might interpret things as, maybe being guided or whatever. And then it just sort of like perpetuates itself. And then it's kind of hard as well when, I don't want to be mean to people. And, I still want to talk to people about my life and their life. And it's just hard when, you can't really like disabuse them of this idea of, that you like somehow like have these like special like abilities or knowledge that they don't have. They just sort of hang on to that belief no matter what. And it just seems like it's something that, I can't ever really get rid of. And it's disturbing to me that I've even noticed it in the atheist community because, even people in the atheist community have come up to me, and, like they think I'm really lucky, just weird. I'm just like, don't start this again because I've already, like, I don't want this. I don't want any more of this in my life. And, I'm not like everybody's guru. So it's just very frustrating, when you try to get away from it and you still can't escape it. It's just, and you don't want to be mean to people. I mean, if I wanted to be mean to people, that would make it a lot easier. But, I don't want to do that.
well,
either.
yeah. Well, no, well, you don't have to be mean. You don't have to be mean. So for some people, that might, for some reason, make them double down in spite or something. But, there's no requirement to be mean. There's just a requirement that if it's the case that you don't want people thinking this, then you should let them know you're not psychic, or at least have a conversation and like we had said earlier, is ask them what it is that indicates to them that they go, it's this situation that proved you said this one right thing. If you have no situations where you were completely wrong, if you just cite that to them and you go, look, I have 20 things here that I was wrong about, and the one thing I was right, is that the statistical significance that you need for a psychic? Because if that's the case, then I don't know what wouldn't convince you, because the psychic criterion for you is just so low. It's 1 out of every 20 things determines the psychic. We're all psychics. I'm wrong about most things all the time. So I would, for me, if it was you, you don't have to be mean. You have to show, like, look, it's just the case that I don't, more times if we test this theory out, I'm not going to get the right answer.
Yeah, I think, we're different people, Tanya. I'm not suggesting that you be mean to people or be a dick to people. And when I pointed out that if they came to me and said that I was psychic, I'd tell them I thought they were stupid. That was about the frustration. If somebody constantly came to me and said, oh, I think you're psychic, after I repeatedly said, I don't believe in that. I don't think I am. There's no reason for you to do this. I don't know, and just eventually you got to put your foot down. And it sounds to me like you like being the person that people come to with their issues. So just, if you want to be the person that listens and is listened to, and you give advice, well, it's clear you're not going to stop. So just give them the advice and, hey, this isn't coming from the other side. This is just coming from me. And you can still have conversations with people, and they can still be interested in their life, and they can be interested in yours. I don't know what else to do about it.
Yeah, there's a weird situation where
that
if the person that believes you, Tanya, that you're a psychic, doesn't accept you as the psychic they trust to tell them that, look, hey, I'm not, but they trust you with all the other things, there's some weird selective reasoning going on there that I'm just confused by. Why, like, the one thing of you saying, look, I don't have advice, or the advice does not come from the other side or something like that, but they're prone to listening to you and taking that type of advice. That's strange to me. And for me, it raises a flag to wonder if you are indeed just more receptive of giving the advice than you think, rather than kind of putting your foot down and saying, and I don't know your situations, but that's just what I would
Well,
think
I mean,
initially.
I am a person that likes to help people and likes to talk to people and, you know, likes to be needed and contribute, you know. So I think, you know, I mean, of course I want to help people, and of course I want to, do anything I can to, make the community better or help, my family's lives or help whoever. I just don't want them to be attributing anything to, me being psychic or anything supernatural. And I just wish that, they would stop doing that part of it and just, treat me like anybody else. And it just seems like, it's just hard to, disabuse them of this idea because, they have these things that they're hanging on to. And it just doesn't seem to matter, that I say that I don't believe that anymore and that I don't think I am. They have this sort of confirmation bias where, well, this and this happened this one time. So therefore, and the only reason I really even know it still goes on is because it gets back to me that people are talking about it, behind my back still, like, where it's like, well, she is, but, don't tell her, just, it's just frustrating. And I just wish that they would stop doing it and just, but obviously
I would
stop talking
tell them,
because, I still want to have friends, but just not, do it that way.
maybe you should get better friends who respect you for who you are and will believe you when you tell them who you're not. And when you tell them, I wish you'd stop treating me as if I'm psychic because I don't think I am, you need better friends.
I guess that's one thing I can work on. I can't really help with the family, but you're kind of stuck with them. But I can definitely work on, better.
I don't know. I don't think you're stuck with family either, but I might be in the minority there because I'm pretty sure that, I'll have whatever family around me, whether they're blood related or not. I really just do not care if somebody happens to be blood related to me. That doesn't put them in a position where they have priority over other people.
Right. That makes sense. All right. Well, thanks, you guys. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Tanya. Hope
right.
you
have a good one.
Yep. Put your foot down, stand up as much as you're able to. And, you got to draw lines and tell people, okay, I would like you to stop doing this now. It's annoying. And if you can't do that, then you're going to have to just deal with that they're not going to stop. All right. I can't hear anybody. I lost Jmike's audio, so I couldn't hear anything Jmike said.
I don't know. I guess my thing got muted. Sorry. Well, I was asking you, have you ever done a show where you've had like someone come up to you and say, hey, well, I know you claim that you're just doing some kind of illusion here, but I really think there's more that meets the eyes, right?
Yes.
They're actually, you've had that situation?
Oh, lots of times.
How do you handle that then?
Well, it's changed. When it first happened, I was shortly after I went in the Navy because I went in the Navy right out of high school and I was still a Southern Baptist fundamentalist Christian. And I remember I would do card tricks and there were some people who grew up in an area where I don't know. I don't want to be too stereotypical, but they believed in spirits and voodoo and evil stuff. And so I would do a card trick and they would say, oh my gosh, you've got like demonic energy or whatever. And I'm like, no. And then I would show them how I did the card trick, literally expose the secret behind it. Yeah. And they would say, some of them would look at me and say, well, that's not what you did the first time. And I'm like, hang on, you're suggesting that I practiced thousands of hours so that I could fool you with dexterity. But instead of doing that, I'm actually summoning demons to do a card trick to fool you when I can fool you without it. And I just proved I can fool you without it. These are people who are desperate to, they have a view of the world that's just not they're not interested in changing it. They don't care what the truth is, and the evidence just makes them double down. And it was very frustrating for me for two reasons, because at the time I was still a Christian and I didn't want people thinking that I was running around using demonic power.
Yeah.
But also I spent actual time practicing. You know, when you practice and you build up a skill, you know, if I do that and people are like, oh, I know you summoned a demon to take your finger off. And I'm like, no, it's simple. I'll show you. And they were like, oh, well, that's not what you did the first time. I had to eventually give up. I will say that it did happen one time after I was an atheist. I did I did a full like 40+ minute magic show for Apostacon. And I did some impossible things, including having a prediction in an envelope on stage that was there from before the show that predicted absolutely everything that would happen. Now, it's a trick that I don't do anymore. It fails because of the too perfect theory, and I don't find it particularly impressive. But after the show was over, somebody came up and said, I don't understand. I'm confused. I'm an atheist. I'm a skeptic. I don't believe in anything supernatural. I don't think that you have special powers. And yet you just did something, and I have no explanation other than you had some supernatural power. And I was like, yeah, but I don't. And so if it's really troubling to you, I will tell you exactly how I did the trick. If you don't want to know, then you can either take my word for it that I did it through trickery. Magic is all about, I know something that you don't know, and I can exploit that to fool you.
Yeah.
But actually you fool yourself. And that guy decided that he didn't want me to tell him how it was done, which is good, because
Yeah.
but I've done that one other occasion when we were in Australia. We had engaged and talked to some street preachers, and I was standing there and I was talking about how the fact I was going to do a magic show that night, and we were talking about God and everything else, and he started asking me about magicians on TV, and he's like, well, do these guys have real magic powers, or is it just tricks? And I said, well, I can't tell you, because as far as I can tell, it's just tricks. I have no reason to think anybody has any magic powers. And he said, yeah, but what about like when they levitate? And I was like, you mean like this? And I walked about 5 or 6 steps away, and I levitated right in front of him out in broad daylight on the street.
Yeah.
And I turned around, and he's looking at me, and his eyes are huge and his mouth is open. And I said, remember how you feel right now, because right now you're ready to believe that I have some supernatural power, just like you think that's true for the people on TV. And he was like, he was just still kind of standing there. And so I did it again, only this time I did it next to him where he could see what I was doing. And then he went, and I was like, no, that's, don't you remember how amazed you were just a second ago?
Yeah.
And it turns out it's a stupid, really easy thing that should not have fooled you. It's not much better than that. And yet it does. You shouldn't be feeling sad that your magic was taken away. You should be feeling happy that now you have a better understanding of something, of a couple different things. One, you know how a trick's done. Two, you know how you were fooled, and you know how it feels to be so completely fooled, and then turn around and find out, oh, I was just wrong. It's one of my favorite things about doing magic is watching how people think and being able to engage on that level. I can't wait until this freaking pandemic and Omicron and all this other stuff is gone, so that I can go back out on tour with the Magic and Skepticism show, because there's valuable lessons and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and it seems like it'll, if anything, right, another benefit is like it adds into like inductive assessments of the world. You could just, whoa, trickery is something that I've now come across, and so things that I believe could possibly be under the same domain.